Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this February 3rd, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight in the news, friends, a lot of weather we're going to be covering tonight. In our first story, we're going to go to hell. The town of Hell freezes over in the U.S. This is actually a story from earlier in the month, last month. But as cold weather conditions are to hit the United States, the small town of Hell in Michigan is ground to a halt due to a thick carpet of snow. This was in January. We've got more snow coming. Let's take a look at this story to start tonight's report.
And the weather in the United States has been so cold that, yes, even hell has frozen over.
It's actually happened, and there it is. It's a place called Hell in Michigan. Residents in the small town are, in some cases, knee-deep in snow. Temperatures plunged to minus 17 degrees Celsius, and even the snowplow got stuck.
Friends, okay, now that was from last month, but more snow like that's coming. We have a full report tonight on how many inches to expect and exactly where around the country. But I want to take us next to Ecuador for a rather dramatic volcanic eruption that occurred today. 3 times over the weekend. Actually, today's Monday, so we're talking about the weekend. This thing erupted 3 times, sending huge clouds of ash and smoke into the sky, authorities said. And I think we only have video with, no commentary with this video. 2 moderate explosions on Saturday were followed by a third of greater size. Local reports say the blast created a column of ash of about 8 kilometers. That'd be about 5 miles above the volcano, which is located in the Pinapi province. And then, friends, more in this way. I've got from our archive some video from March of last year, March 11, when that volcano erupted then.
Ecuador's Tungurahua volcano. It's been spewing glowing ash into the air as it showed intensified activity for a second day. The pictures, I think, are going to get even better because you can see the ash coming out from there and smoke billowing into the sky. I can only be reassured that people living near there were told to leave the area. Extraordinary pictures.
Firework display or something.
It's certainly a rather amazing sight.
Friends, we showed you that in March last year. I simply pulled that from our archive to show that to you again. And parts of Europe are being battered by snow. Storms, floods could face further disruption, forecasters have warned. At least 1,000 people had to be rescued from snowstorms in Serbia, while the UK has endured its wettest January since records began. I'll have more to say on that in a moment. Tim Allmans has this report.
Snaking through the bleak landscape of northern Serbia, a line of cars and buses stranded in the snow. The army had to rescue at least 1,000 people here as snowdrifts caused chaos and disruption. This had been, by local standards, a fairly mild winter, but not anymore. In West Wales, this bus had 10 people on board when it was hit by a huge wave. They made it to safety, but more bad weather is heading this way. Strong winds and high waves caused destruction in the Basque Country. Here in Drought, parts of the seafront were torn up. Now locals begin the clean-up operation. Cordillero, even the breakwater designed to hold back the elements failed. In Italy, they've had rain and snow. Flooding, landslides and households turned upside down.
alla care popolazioni di Roma e
At the
della
Vatican, Pope Francis offered prayers for all those affected. Down below, perhaps appropriately, a sea of umbrellas. Tim Allman, BBC News.
And friends, with the Pope getting in there at the end of that last video report, that makes me want to bring up our chart and mention a couple of things. One, the Pope coming up in there, he brought the first seal into the story tonight. The first seal being depicted in the book of Revelation as a white horse, which Jesus Christ described in plain language, as the gospel writers wrote up, as him saying, beware of those who would deceive you religiously, saying that, yes, I, Christ, have come, and yet delivering a message about Christ, about me, as Christ said it, instead of the message that I brought. So beware of that deception. That's the white horse, the first seal of Revelation. And going over to the fourth column now, the fourth seal of the book of Revelation is depicted by a pale horse, and we have a pale green color here. The word used for pale is a derivation of the word green, a pale green color. And its rider is described as a rider whose name is Death. Alongside, Revelation says, Hades, hell, the grave, rides alongside this pale horse and its rider named Death. And Jesus Christ described the activities of this pale horse in terms that the gospel writers wrote up in three different verbiages. Loimus, meaning pestilences, disease epidemics, the plagues of Egypt. Seismus, meaning commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, seismic activity, commotions in the air such as gale force winds, commotions on the ground such as earthquakes, and that includes also other seismic action on the ground, activity on the ground, volcanic eruptions, and floods, and all kind of weather conditions like we're giving you in our reports tonight. And I've pulled from just the end of last month. This comes from January 21st. The bad weather and flooding that has battered much of southwest and southern Britain has left many farms covered by floodwater, and we're not talking about just little temporary flashes of floodwater and then it's gone. In Somerset, a lot of productive farmland has been lost, with more than 43 square miles flooded with waters that just stays there and rots. The produce. Jeremy Cook reports from the Somerset levels, where farmers are fearing a disastrous year.
The meadows and wheat fields of Somerset, deep underwater. James Winslade's farm is one of many flooded out for weeks on end.
How much of this is underwater?
Everything bar a tiny little strip between the two
every
farms.
One of these fields, everything.
Everything, including this property here.
A massive problem, and for James, a new one. Flash floods here are common, but now, for a second year running, there's been standing water on the farm for weeks. Crops are rotting in the ground, the grass to feed 600 head of cattle is ruined. Many farmers blame the build-up of silt in drains and rivers, which slows the flow of water off the land. And they want more action from the Environment Agency.
Clean the blooming river out. You know, everybody knows what needs to be done. Just listen to us and do it.
They are trying. The Environment Agency is doing all it can to get the water off the fields and back into the rivers.
Well, these pumps have been going flat out day and night for weeks now. But every time the water level starts to drop, the rains come again. And that means the farmland all around here is still underwater.
And friends, you know, that's story after story is showing you this kind of thing. Let's go back to our chart again just for a moment. I want to be sure you get something, that when these four horses become more and more active, that simply means that we're getting closer and closer to the fifth seal, which hasn't come yet. That's a time of great tribulation. So great that no time before it has ever been so troublesome, so bad, so with so much tribulation as will occur during this time, the mega trouble, great tribulation, that no time again will ever be like it. Nothing before it, nothing ever again after it will be so bad as this is going to be. Now there will be trouble. Jesus Christ described the fourth seal, the pale horse, as having trouble when he used the word terake, which in the Greek means troubled waters, literally and figuratively. And in a figurative sense, it means mobs and seditions. But trouble, but not the great trouble of the fifth seal. But when you see this kind of, the four seals with trouble, not the great trouble, but trouble and pestilences, disease epidemics, seismic conditions, activities such as flooding and bad weather of all kinds, especially with the gale force winds and earthquake-like activity, rumblings, volcanic eruptions, and so on. And when you see war and rumors of war, we've got story after story about, Syria and then all these mobs and seditions and things that are leading to civil war in Thailand, Bangkok, and city after city, in Ukraine, stories on that all the past several weeks. And then the growth of the white horse, the religious deception, with over 1 billion people, 1/6 of the world belonging to the religion, from whom the false prophet will come, who will team up with the beast that will put together the power that will evolve into the Great Tribulation and World War III and the martyrdom of saints once again. But when we see these four seals becoming more and more active, as they are today, that means that fifth seal could break any time, and that time's out. That comes right together with the coming together of the 10 nations, 5 from the east, 5 from the west, that form the 5 toes of one foot and 5 toes of the other foot of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw, that Daniel explained was represented the Gentile kingdoms right down to our time today. Now, friends, I don't want to take time to go into all the details of that right now. Just hit the highlights with you and give you more stories in the time we have about all the activity that's going on, upset weather conditions, many of them worse than they've ever been, some worse in the last than they've been in the last 50 years, some worse in conditions of record keeping ever. That should tell you this thing is coming together. And I'm a little excited about it tonight because I hope you get the point that you can't just la-di-da through the news and say, oh, well, just more bad weather here, more bad weather. We got more snow and, terrible cold snow come. People are being killed by this. The fourth horse, the fourth seal, that pale horse, and its rider named Death are having a field day. And our next story, heavy rains have caused severe flooding in several Italian cities, including Pisa, Florence, and the capital, Rome. Meanwhile, deep snowdrifts left dozens of people stranded in Serbia, as Grain Harrington reports.
Torrential rain brought rivers to bursting point across parts of Italy. The River Arno breached its banks, causing flooding around the Tuscan towns of Pisa and Florence. These aerial pictures show some houses in the region have been completely cut off. More than 1,000 people are affected, many of them forced to evacuate their homes. For some, it brings back memories of the fatal floods in 1966, which killed more than 30 people and damaged millions of priceless works of art. In the capital, the River Tiber has flooded, and an emergency helpline has been receiving thousands of calls. Across the Adriatic in Serbia, dozens have been stranded by snow. Strong winds are forming large drifts, resulting in blocked roads and power cuts. Emergency services are on high alert in both countries. Grania Harrington, BBC News.
And friends, recent storms across the UK have caused travel chaos and left hundreds of homes flooded. But the bad weather has also taken a terrible toll on wildlife. A study by the Environmental Agency suggests 48 sites of special scientific interest have been severely affected. David Schuckman reports on the impact and meets some of the lucky survivors.
Seal pups in a rescue centre, separated from their mother by a violent tidal surge. Now cared for by the RSPCA, these pups are lucky survivors. An unknown number was swept away. Baby otters found on a road, also believed to be victims of flooding. And on the Norfolk coast, the RSPB filmed one of the many birds that didn't get away. What's emerging is how wildlife has suffered in this winter of storms.
This is worse than anything we've ever seen before. This impact of this tidal surge, it was the highest ever recorded in many parts, and the impact to these wildlife sites is in some cases devastating.
Up and down the coast, nature reserves have been ruined. Seawater now flows through breaches in the defences. Here at Blakeney, on the north coast of Norfolk, this wrecked embankment is just one of countless examples of the damage. Even now, the full extent isn't known.
This is one of many places where the sea has just punched a hole right through the defences. Salt water now lies in what used to be a freshwater habitat. There are hundreds of breaches like this around the country, so tough choices lie ahead about where to repair and where to give up.
A nature reserve like this depends on fresh water to survive. So where seawater has flooded in, the plants, insects and fish that make up the ecosystem are all put at risk. The big worry is what this means for the famous bird life here. Some birds can adapt, but others rely on the food chain provided by fresh water.
It's not just about losing some invisible insects, it's about potentially losing the base of a pyramid that includes all the other species as well. You know, nature has a way of bouncing back, but we won't know for sure just how quickly it can bounce back.
Repairs to a broken barrier. This is to guard houses, not wildlife. There's a limited budget and not everything can be protected.
No wonder people are nervous.
Marie Strong is the county councillor for the area, and she says the priorities for flood defence are clear.
The first thing's got to be homes and people and businesses, because that's people's livelihoods. It's not just saying, oh, that shop's got to be kept going. That has a knock-on effect on people's lives. But of course, so does the wildlife, and particularly around here, that does have an effect on tourism. So that's got to follow, but it does need to follow.
Wildlife can be resilient, but the challenge this winter has been exceptional, and it's not over yet. David Schuckman, BBC News, on the Norfolk coast.
Thank you, David Schuckman, for a good report of sad situation. And that's not the only place, friends, that suffering affects upon the animals. Our next story that comes out of Australia. Extreme heat there has been killing the bats. And as we enter into another record-setting freezing spell in the United States and in North America and Canada also, temperatures have soared as high as 50 degrees centigrade in Australia. Now, I forget how that converts over in Fahrenheit at the moment, but when you see the video that we have for you on this, friends, you'll see that 50 degrees centigrade is practically at the top of the thermometer that they use in Australia for outdoor temperatures. The extreme conditions have proved challenging for local residents and also taken a terrible toll on wildlife there. At least 50,000 bats are reported to have been killed by the heat in the state of Queensland. This video, filmed by Murray Pass, reveals the devastating impact of the heat wave on a bat colony in Dayboro, Queensland.
It's Sunday, 5th of January 2014. This is in Dayboro, running along Terrace Creek just down there that runs into North Pine Dam. And this is just some footage of the massive bat carnage from yesterday's 40 plus heat wave. This is a small section of not too happy bats. Just some that have fallen from the trees. You can hear there's still plenty that survived. The live ones are up there flapping their wings to keep them cool as they do, but you can see there's a lot that are just hanging there, obviously dead. This is how close they came to the ground. This is only a couple of metres off the ground where they were trying to escape the heat yesterday, but obviously didn't really do the trick for most of them. But yeah, I haven't even ventured down much more into the creek. This colony is about 10,000 strong, and my property probably goes for at least half a k down this creek. So it just kind of goes on and on. I'm guessing death toll's probably in the 1,000 plus.
And friends, I pulled that story from 10 January. It dovetailed with today's story about the killing of the wildlife in the UK from the weather, and same thing happening in Australia. But not only that, I wanted you to understand that while we're suffering tremendous freezing in North America and in Europe, Australia is having traumatic brush fire situations, as you can see behind me. Now, this is some film from some video from middle of January, and I wanted to let you know that I just got a note that 41.7 degrees centigrade equals 107 degrees Fahrenheit. So when they mentioned early January having 50 degrees centigrade weather in Australia, while we were having record as low as 50 below zero Fahrenheit degrees in the United States, they were having weather over 110 degrees there, whatever 50 degrees centigrade comes out. 41.7 is 107 degrees Fahrenheit, so pretty hot there. And then what may have triggered some of that off was, as you may see in this video, I'm just going to roll behind me, from middle of January, lightning strikes as Australian heat wave was continuing in mid-January, and that lightning struck during extreme hot weather with temperatures over 40 degrees centigrade. That would be 104 degrees Fahrenheit in some areas, and several brush fires took shape, got going as a result of that. Now, Australia saw the hottest year on record. I want you to be sure that this is understood. Come just as we crossed the line into January, into 2014 this year, Australia experienced its hottest record, or its hottest year on record in 2013, officials there said. Temperatures were the warmest since records began in 1910, according to the Bureau of Meteorology in its as it reported in its annual report. There has been criticism from environmentalists that the new conservative government is not doing enough to tackle the problem with what they are calling climate change. Now, this report, friends, let me see when we're pulling this from. This is from early January, and I pull this out because it brings out the point that Australia's had its hottest year on record. John Donaldson has this report.
You know it's a scorcher when your flip-flops are sticking to the road. The new year in Australia has begun like the old one ended. Hot. Temperatures in parts of the country have this week risen into the high 40s. And now the Australian Bureau of Meteorology has said last year was the hottest on record, 1.2 degrees Celsius above the long-term average.
All right, and that's the point I wanted you to get out of that story, friends. And when he says 40 degrees, he's talking, for a European report, he's talking Australian report. He's talking centigrade. So Fahrenheit, we're looking at over 110 degrees. Friends, I have something that in our last couple of minutes that the BBC put together. Michael Hirsch, again, outstanding job on doing these 2-minute summaries. He put together a little 2-minute outline of weather from the past couple of for a long time. Friends, that was a look at, from the BBC, looking back at 12 months of wild weather around the world. And before we sign out tonight, friends, I want to give you this story. Drought-hit California is unable to supply water. Farmers said the announcement was a terrible blow. California's water agency has announced it may, for the first time, be unable to deliver water to local agencies amid a worsening drought. 2/3 of state residents and 1 million acres, 404,500 hectares of farmland, get part or all of their drinking and irrigation supplies from the agency. A statewide drought was declared earlier this month as the largest reservoirs sank to record low levels. Forecasters have warned 2014 could be California's driest year on record. The extreme conditions have already caused a wildfire that destroyed homes in the Los Angeles area. Previous extremely dry years led to catastrophic wildfire seasons in California in 2003 and 2007. And friends, that's it for tonight, except for just a quick look at a little weather map. I want to bring this forward real quick. Snow is on the way into across the eastern part of the United States. Here are a few weather maps. We'll give you details as this hits. These are forecast for the next couple of days coming up, beginning tonight. And we'll have more on that as we are back with you for our next edition of Nightcast, God willing, and the creek don't rise tomorrow night, Tuesday night. Until then, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.